I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I was previously engaged to my ex, Felix, who was 34, nearly 4 years ago when I was 26. We were supposed to be wed 3 years ago, but he ended things with me over a text message just 1 week before we were due to get married. He then went to Germany, where he'd been offered the job of his dreams. Felix and I became acquainted thanks to mutual friends, and we had been in a relationship for 3 years before he proposed to me, and we became engaged. Felix had studied zoology and was working locally as a professor when we first met. But I always understood that his ambition was to make a significant difference in the world through his work, which is really admirable. When he was offered a research specialist position for a brand new project in his field, he chose to take it and moved away without discussing anything with me. The bachelor party for him and his friends was supposed to be in Hawaii a week before our wedding, however. He never arrived at the airport. We only discovered several hours later that he was in Germany and that he was ending our relationship due to a job opportunity he couldn't pass up. He shared with me that he understood it would be impossible for me to abandon my existing life, the people I care about, and my job here, and he didn't want me to make any compromises either. He likewise wasn't willing to abandon his ambitions and remain here just for me, so, after deliberating on this for months, he chose to embark on this adventure on his own. He preferred to avoid a drawn-out farewell or even a conversation regarding this matter, which is why he chose to depart as swiftly as possible. He expressed his regret, saying he was certain I'd find someone more suitable, and that this was the only path forward. But his aspirations were too vital for him to relinquish. I truly had no issue with his goals or anything similar, yet I simply wished he'd at least talked things over with me before making the decision to go and accepting the job offer all those years ago. My career has always revolved around architecture, and the sole reason I worked was to accumulate funds and have the freedom to purchase whatever I desired, meaning I never harbored lofty ideals of altering the world or contributing positively to the community. I was quite self-centered, which I suppose is why I didn't fully grasp what he valued. Alternatively, perhaps I was just a regular person who recognized the importance of open communication and knew you shouldn't deceive your future spouse, and then end things with a text message only a week before our wedding. Nonetheless, once we split, naturally we ceased communicating, and all our mutual friends distanced themselves from him as well. While we were together, our relationship had been fantastic, and the separation had seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Despite my attempts to accept it, I wasn't, and I completely fell apart in those subsequent weeks. Felix took care of all the wedding vendors' bills as a sort of sorry, and I wasn't financially responsible for any of it. Consequently, I had no cause to contact him either, and our final discussion ended up being the breakup, which I would replay in my mind almost daily after he departed. We had lived together for a significant period before he moved, and several weeks after he ended things, his cousin Sam, a 32-year-old male, showed up to collect his possessions since he'd left quite a bit behind, as he didn't want to arouse my suspicions. I'd met Sam at a couple of family gatherings of Felix's before, but we weren't particularly close, nor were Sam and Felix very close, but it seemed that nobody else from the family was speaking to him. He offered Sam $2,000 to have his belongings shipped to him. Sam played guitar in a band that was still having a tough time gaining traction, and he needed the cash, so he accepted the offer to get the task done. When Sam came to the house to gather the last of Felix's things, I kept my distance, but I believe I must have appeared incredibly sad. So rather than just gathering the things and departing, he opted to stick around for a bit and have a chat. I wasn't in the mood to chat, but he stuck around until I'd spilled everything that was on my mind. And when I started, I simply couldn't shut up. It was mortifying, but I wound up sobbing right there in front of him, and he soothed me the whole time. He allowed me to get all my emotions out, and later, he told me I needed to be tough. He also mentioned that Felix was a fool and didn't realize what he'd thrown away, which actually lifted my spirits. You see, Felix leaving had totally destroyed my sense of self and any confidence I had. That day, he even gave me his phone number, telling me to call him anytime I needed someone to talk to, and then he hugged me before he left. It was a super kind gesture, even though there was no reason for him to do it. He was simply there to grab his cousin's stuff, and it's not like we were particularly close. But he still appeared to care about me, and that's what really moved me about him. We kept in contact and ended up becoming real pals in a matter of weeks. He was actually the one who helped me find joy again, and I doubt I could have gotten over that heartbreak if Sam hadn't been there with me every step of the journey. He had a way of persuading me to get out of the house, go to my job, and even socialize with my friends on weekends, rather than staying put and feeling sorry for myself or drinking. But he was also perceptive enough to know when I simply needed some alone time, and on those days he would come over and just quietly sit with me. I didn't even notice when I gradually fell for him, and he began spending more and more time at my apartment rather than at his. One day, about 2 years ago, he showed up at my place and essentially never left. That's how we wound up moving in together, and although most folks would consider it strange and hasty, I wouldn't say that because I truly care for him, and we're now married, so I believe our relationship is destined to endure. We moved in together, and ultimately, at the start of this year, we agreed it was time to tie the knot because of various practical and legal advantages. It was a small, private wedding that only a select few knew about, and that's precisely the way we wanted it. Everyone in his family and all my friends had been instructed not to tell Felix any details about the wedding. We didn't want him finding out about it because he'd definitely think it was odd that I was marrying his cousin, and honestly, I just didn't want to get involved in the potential drama. I knew everyone had received specific orders to keep this hidden from him. Even Felix's mom and dad were at the wedding, since they'd been kind to me even though Felix and I were no longer together, and they'd given us their blessing. They assured me they'd keep it a secret from Felix too, but I wasn't entirely sure about it since they'd stayed in contact with him, and they'd forgiven him shortly after we split up. I didn't fault them, seeing as he was their only son after all. But thankfully, everyone kept their word, including his parents, and they made sure Felix didn't discover that Sam and I were married. It's been a few months, and life with Sam has been amazing. I realized Felix was right when he told me I'd find someone better. Everything had been going smoothly, but then last week, Felix just showed up at my door, totally out of nowhere. I was completely taken aback since I hadn't anticipated it. We hadn't spoken since our breakup, and it had been 3 whole years. After that, he never bothered to contact me or find out how I was doing, and I didn't try to reach out to him either. He had come home to visit for the holidays a couple of times, as our mutual friends mentioned. But we never ran into each other, and he never saw any of our friends either. This time, though, he decided to actually speak to me face to face. Rather than calling me and arranging a meeting, as anyone else would, he just appeared at my house with flowers. Before I could even open my mouth, he started apologizing for messing things up between us, explaining he was finally ready to put in the effort and wanted me back. He mentioned that the research project he'd been involved in had failed completely, and they'd run out of money. It seemed improbable they'd secure another grant anytime soon, so he'd left that job and returned here to stay. He confessed he regretted ever leaving me, especially the way he'd ended things through a text message. He admitted I deserved better treatment after we'd been together for so long, and honestly, I was relieved he'd finally realized that, at the very least. He concluded his impassioned plea by stating that, now that he was back, we could resume our relationship exactly where we'd left off and get married as soon as possible. During the 3 years we were apart, he'd come to see that I was the woman he'd always wanted, and that he'd made a huge blunder by breaking up with me. Therefore, he really wanted to give our relationship another shot and get back together. I let him complete his statement, making sure I didn't cut him off while he spoke because I was curious to find out the point he was trying to make. However, once he was finished, I didn't speak very much, just showed him my ring, letting him know I'd already tied the knot with Sam, who also happened to be his cousin and was infinitely superior. I also made it clear that his apology was completely insufficient and arrived far too late. His mouth actually fell open in shock, which gave me the chance to shut the door in his face, and I warned him to get out before I did something drastic. I was incredibly angry afterwards and tried to regain my composure until Sam got home. Since it was the weekend, he was out with some of his colleagues from work, so he wasn't at home. The band he was in had disbanded a couple of years previously, which was right around the time when we started to get really serious. He joined his friend's father in their event management company. And if the events required live music, he and his bandmates could get back together and perform. It was truly a good opportunity for him, I thought. The truth is that it had been a really tough week for him at his job because he had a lot of projects scheduled one after the other. So this was a much-needed time off, and I didn't want to spoil it for him. Because of that, I didn't send him any messages or phone him about this ordeal until he returned home. I then filled him in on Felix's arrival. He said his uncle, Felix's father, had tried to get in touch with him numerous times, but he hadn't known the reason, and having been out with his buddies, had planned to simply call back later. However, now that he was aware of the situation, he felt uneasy about the whole scenario. He admitted he hadn't really considered how Felix would react when he found out. I pointed out that his opinion was inconsequential since he was the one who ended things with me without a good reason or even a simple farewell, rendering his feelings unimportant. Following that chat, we agreed to speak to Felix's folks, given they'd been trying to contact Sam repeatedly while he was out. They'd also tried to reach me, but I hadn't checked my phone because I was irritated. Once we were on a call together, they told us that immediately after Felix came to see me, he went to their home and lost it because of what he'd discovered. First, he berated them for keeping this secret from him for such a long time. Actually, it had been years, if you included the time we were together and living as a couple. He accused them and the whole family of betraying him and said they were all crazy for backing our marriage and allowing this to occur. He stated that, apparently, I was a repulsive person for going after his cousin since I couldn't have him. He was absolutely certain that my actions were solely driven by a desire for payback, and that my emotions towards Sam weren't genuine. He accused me of manipulating Sam to stir up his jealousy, but he announced that he wasn't fooled and that he was repulsed by it all. I found it hard to fathom him saying such harsh things about me. It was all completely false, every single word. If I truly wanted to make him jealous, I would have done it long ago. I wouldn't have waited for him to try and win me back, just to then inform him that I'm now married. Above all else, I'm not some crazy person who's still obsessed with him and got married purely to make him feel bad. I genuinely care for Sam, and that's the reason I'm with him. I didn't feel like I needed to justify myself, so I didn't address any of this over the next few days. Sam and I both acted like he hadn't even shown up and attempted to carry on with our lives. However, Felix reappeared a few days ago, and this time, we were both at home. We had only just arrived back from work when we heard Felix yelling for us, so we went outside and found him causing a drunken disturbance in the street in front of our place. He was yelling at the top of his lungs, furious that we'd wrecked his existence, which honestly made no sense because he'd only just found out about us a few days before. As soon as we opened the door and he saw me, it became painfully obvious that we'd messed up because the second he laid eyes on me, he burst into loud, uncontrollable tears. He began professing his undying love for me and how I'd been constantly on his mind, even when he was residing in Germany. The only reason he'd been avoiding contacting me was because he didn't want to disrupt the tranquility of my life by re-entering it. He stated that he could accept that I had moved on. However, what he couldn't reconcile was that I'd moved on with his cousin, of all the people in the world. He accused me of being self-centered and insensitive, saying it was audacious of us to get married knowing about my past with him. At that moment, Sam contacted the authorities, and they removed him from the premises, but I couldn't stop dwelling on his words. It was deeply disturbing to witness him behaving that way because normally, he was a very composed individual. I could see that seeing me with Sam had genuinely shattered him. Sam and I haven't discussed that situation, choosing to act as though it never occurred. But I'm uncertain how long we can keep pretending that this isn't happening, how much longer we can keep it swept under the rug. Honestly, I never really thought much about Felix's return or how he'd respond to my current situation and what he might have to say about my marriage. It really shouldn't bother me, but for some reason, it does, and it bothers me a lot. We were able to put my past relationship with him out of mind for so long because he was out of the picture. Now that he's returned and his presence is more noticeable, it's becoming increasingly hard to overlook that chapter of my life. Luckily, things haven't been strange between us, but I understand that there are many unspoken things between Sam and me, and I'm really eager to have a discussion about this, hoping to clear the air. In addition to this, I can't shake the feeling that Felix is justified in feeling strange about Sam and me getting together. If my former partner married my relative, I'd probably feel the same way. And on top of that, his whole family was involved in everything. They knew what was going on, and they never mentioned anything to him, possibly causing a complete collapse of trust. However, that isn't actually my problem, and yet, for some reason, I continue to feel responsible. Does Ida get an L for marrying my former fiancé's cousin after he ended things with me over a text a week before our wedding? The support from so many people means the world to both Sam and me. I'll always cherish the kind words everyone shared, because we truly needed that boost to pull ourselves together, especially given the situation with Felix and all that mess. A week has already passed since the police had to take him away, after he showed up drunk at our door, making a complete spectacle, and by now, practically every member of the family is aware of it. They took the time to contact us, assuring us we weren't at fault and that we shouldn't pay any mind to whatever Felix had been spreading about us. There's nothing even remotely sleazy or offensive about falling in love and then getting married. Actually, it's the exact opposite of repulsive. It's truly wonderful, and we have to embrace it, rather than letting some pathetic, worthless person's negativity get to us. Everyone, including his parents, has cut him off, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it. Honestly, not even one person from his family is backing him up, and that really speaks volumes to both Sam and me. It's totally okay for Sam and me to be together because I wasn't unfaithful to Felix, and he's the one who ended our relationship, and in the most awful way. Furthermore, Sam helped me heal, so I have nothing to feel embarrassed about. I even confided in my friends about everything, and they were completely on my side as well. I felt a huge wave of relief when I heard everyone claim Felix was just insane and envious. Nevertheless, Sam and I ultimately decided to seek professional help. Dealing with Felix's reappearance hasn't been a walk in the park for us, as a pair, and we believe some things require discussion and resolution. Our counseling sessions begin very soon. Update 2. So, Felix gave us just a short 2 weeks to process our emotions before his next assault, which unfortunately went online. Before that, he showed up at our house, intoxicated and acting erratic, and insulted us directly. Now, he apparently wanted to spread his negativity to more people by trashing us in front of a much larger audience. He put up a hateful post about us on the internet. He said that our relationship was only because we wanted to get even with him, and he added that we are both losers who hate to see other people do well. He also said we likely connected over our shared dislike of him, and our relationship was simply built on revenge. He even suggested that the reason I didn't attempt to win him back after we broke up was because I had already been involved with Sam, and he had just provided me a perfect escape route. The implication that I had been unfaithful when he knew that wasn't true was repulsive. I had been completely head over heels for him, but he chose to end our relationship to pursue his goals or whatever. I couldn't believe he wouldn't even speak to me, but somehow he thought I should just hang around for him. Seriously, the ego on that guy was unreal. I never actually saw the post myself since I stopped following him everywhere after we split up, but some of my friends sent it to me. I told them that I'd take legal action for defamation if he continued with it. I told them to give him the message, and that's when he finally removed the post. But then, he texted me, saying I deserved what was happening and used a horrible, insulting word, starting with W that was the breaking point, and I told him that if he ever messaged me again, I would absolutely destroy his life and make sure he would never bounce back. Even after that, he had the nerve to text back, saying I deserved to be with Sam because Sam was just a loser, average at guitar and totally useless without it. And then he acted as if he'd found someone else and that she was prettier than me, and he was glad he'd broken up with me. He wished he'd broken things off at our wedding and made me cry harder. I was stunned that he could even think those things, let alone actually say them out loud. I ultimately chose to block his phone number this time, something I hadn't done even over the last 2 years. Frankly, it hadn't crossed my mind because I truly didn't think he would text me, and there was no way I was going to contact him, so it simply never occurred to me. But now he's officially blocked, and he can't get a hold of me anymore. If he actually shows up at my place again, I will absolutely pursue a restraining order. Update 3. Hey, so I forwarded the screenshots of my last conversation with Felix to everyone, his entire family, and all of my friends. They weren't speaking to him anyway, and those pictures just guaranteed they wouldn't ever speak to him again. Everyone was just as stunned as I was when I saw those messages, and it all clicked into place when his parents told us he'd started drinking heavily while in Germany. Evidently, he wasn't lying about being unable to get over me, even while he was over there. And due to that, mixed with the failure of his research, he'd turned to alcohol. And now he's got a real problem with alcohol. This clarifies his actions, but it doesn't make them okay. His parents mentioned he'd been staying in a hotel, but they chose to bring him back home because they were worried about losing him if they didn't. They both apologized to us on his behalf for all of his actions and said they had to take care of him, because he was their only child. They said they couldn't live with themselves if they just gave up on him. To be truthful, I can see where they're coming from, and frankly, I don't really want to fault them. In the end, they are his mom and dad, and he has nobody to depend on except them. Furthermore, I don't think any of us would want something bad to befall him, regardless of what type of individual he is. His parents are good-hearted individuals. They've always been generous towards me, and they've confronted him when he's made mistakes, so if they choose to give him assistance, I respect that decision. Sam and I are more in love than we've ever been, and going to marriage counseling has made us stronger than ever before. As a matter of fact, we've even started to consider having a child and finally forming a family. I'm currently discussing a potential promotion at work, and if I get a higher salary, we could relocate to a larger home in a superior neighborhood. So that's the way things are progressing for us, and we're hoping that things will continue to improve.